Lynn Thomas is actually currently a local writer. She's in Starkville, Mississippi now, where she is based, but she actually is publishing internationally. Her imprint is HarperCollins International and HQ, sorry. Thank you. No, please correct. Please correct. I'm very correctable as a librarian and a teacher. So one of the fun stats that we talked about before I came out here that I had no idea is that she has now sold since April 2018, 100,000 books. So we are very honored to have someone so successful with us today. She is the author of both the Sarah Bennett mystery series and the Cat Carlisle mystery series. And the Cat Carlisle mysteries are available for purchase and for signing after the fact. We also have with us Vic Jones, who is doing our Q&A today and moderating. She is a Public Services Library Associate here at Fayette Memorial Library. She has her bachelor's in history from Nova Southeastern, yes, and her master's in history from University of Northern Florida. She's currently doing an MLAS at University of Southern Mississippi with a focus on archives and special collections. So she's gonna do some Q&A with us, but I think we're gonna start off with a reading.
Sure.
From The Silent Woman.
Sure. Let me set this up for you a little bit. My protagonist has reason to believe the story takes place in London in 1937. And my protagonist, Cat Carlisle, is married to an industrial engineer who's working on weapons for the war effort. England's going to war, but her people don't know it. So her husband knows it. And she gets approached by a long grooming process of about a year. She meets this man in a park and they become friends. And he grooms her to switch documents that her husband is working on because he thinks there's a spy in her house. And they want to switch the documents so the spy will get the wrong documents to turn over to the Germans. So she has done this once for him and she's getting ready to do it again and accept another mission. And she's meeting him at this park. And when she shows up, he's not there. He's sent someone else. So I didn't want to start at the beginning. I kind of wanted to drop you guys in the middle. So here we go. Cat knew something was wrong the minute she turned into the garden square. Reginald wasn't at their bench. Instead, a young woman with silky brown hair sat where Reginald should have been. She wore a linen suit and a smart hat and the sheerest of veils over her eyes. Her shoes were a fine suede with a delicate strap across the top. Cat nodded at her, ready to walk past when the young woman addressed her. Mrs. Carlisle? Her voice was low and sultry. Cat stopped. Do I know you? Reginald sent me. Cat panicked. Her mouth went dry. I don't know any Reginald. Reginald had to go to France, and I've been out shopping for my family today. We need apples. We seem to go through St. Edmund's pippins. My husband loves them, and so do my children. That's the code word, by the way, the apples. The woman waited for Cat to register the code word. Won't you sit down, please, Mrs. Carlisle? Cat sat down, reluctant and all of a sudden nervous. How did things go today? Any problems? The woman smiled and acted as though she were discussing the weather. Rather well, actually, Cat said. When she was sure that no one watched, she took the magazine out of her bag and handed it to the woman. The woman skimmed through the magazine, took the envelope from between its pages, and tucked it in her own bag. We have a problem. The woman spoke in a light tone. Anyone who passed would think she and Cat were discussing the mundane topics favored by housewives all across England. She opened a fashion magazine and scooted close to Cat. As she spoke, she smiled and nodded while pointing to an advertisement for rayon frocks. Your husband is going to bring home an extremely important document tonight. You need to do another switch for us. Switch it when he's home? Smile and act natural, Mrs. Carlisle. Always assume you're being watched. This is important. Cat slowed her breath. She sat back on the bench and crossed her legs. May I? She pointed to the fashion magazine. When the woman handed it to Cat, she flipped through the pages and held the magazine open at a full-page color ad for women's shoes. I rather like these shoes, she said, but yours are much finer. Where did you get them? She met the woman's eyes and didn't look away. The two women sized each other up. Reginald's minion with her fine clothes and independent confidence, and Cat, a sophisticated socialite who had means to open doors this woman would never have access to, no matter how fine her clothes. Do you have a husband? Kat asked. The question caught the woman off guard. She hesitated and stumbled over her words. I didn't think so, Kat said. I'm well aware of how important this is. I'm the one taking the risks here. I'm assuming you have a plan for me to switch the documents when everyone is home. If you'd be so kind as to tell me what that plan is, I'll be on my way. Very well. Tonight after dinner, you are to put some powder in your husband's drink. It's tasteless and odorless, so don't worry about that. After 20 minutes, he will be sound asleep. I'll send you away with a document to replace the one that your husband brings home. Switch the document. That's all you need to do. Your husband won't know what you've done. The powder will make him sleep for the night. It won't be the first time he's spent the night passed out in his study. Tomorrow morning, you'll come here at 9 o'clock as per usual. Sit on this bench, feed the birds, an agent will take the document from you. That's it. How will I know who the agent is? He will say that it's good to see you and ask if you've recovered from your skiing accident in Switzerland. You'll respond that you haven't been to Switzerland in ages. Now repeat back what I just told you. Kat repeated what the woman had said to her verbatim. Very good. The woman put a straw shopping bag on the bench between them. It was stuffed with bread, leeks, and a worn-looking apple. The envelope that you'll switch and the sleeping powder are in the bottom of the bag. I cannot impress upon you how important this mission is. We rarely have someone without proper training do this type of work, Mrs. Carlisle. Drug your husband and leave him be. Wait until everyone is out of the house and safely out of your way. Switch the documents. Keep your wits about you and you'll be fine. Benton will know I've drugged him, Kat said. Not likely. The woman shook her head. He's been drinking since noon. He and his cronies went to the London Club after their meeting. They're still there. Tomorrow morning, he'll wake up with a hangover and assume he just drank too much. What about Isabel and Marie? Isabel hovers over Benton like a fussy mother, Kat said. Isabel and her secretary will be gone this evening. We've arranged a dinner engagement, after which she will be given a very generous donation to that orphanage she is so passionate about. Mr. Blackwell will be working late in his shop, and the young child who is your paid companion will be at the cinema with neighbors. How did you make all these arrangements? With great care, Mrs. Carlisle. That is how we get things done without getting caught. You are to carry out this mission according to the exact instructions I have given you. Have I made myself clear? The woman smiled that fake smile. Kat wanted to slap her pretty face. An uncontrollable bubble of laughter laced with the tiniest amount of hysteria came but unbidden out of her mouth. Are you all right? The woman looked at Kat with genuine concern. Kat ignored her. My husband and I haven't spoken in days. He's going to think it's strange when I bring him something to eat and drink, as though all is well between us. Apologize, tell him you're sorry, throw yourself on the sword if you will. He won't believe me, Kat said. He'll laugh in my face and tell me to go to hell. You look like someone who's rather adept at manipulation. I suggest you use those skills now. Bring your husband his milk or wine, it doesn't matter which. Convince him to drink it, Mrs. Carlisle. She gave Kat a penetrating look. Are you able to do this? I need to know. If this is beyond your ability, we can make other arrangements. Good day. Kat stood up and grabbed the shopping bag. Energy crackled through her like electricity arcing on a wire. Her senses hummed. She craved activity. She left the garden square and started walking, with no destination in mind. She just walked, clipping along the pavement, her breath fast and hard as she stepped in time with it. She passed through the residential district and soon came to the shops. She ignored the throngs of people who stepped out of her way, like the parting of the sea. I'll stop there. Kind of drops you in the middle, but she wants out of her marriage and she wants away from her husband. And while they have money, she's an orphan, but she married into a socially prominent family. Her husband's rather controlling, and although she has access to shops and charge accounts everywhere, she has no money of her own. He keeps her on a short string. So that sets up the second act of the book, which is her pushing against that, I'll say.
It sets up a lot of tension.
It does.
Obviously.
Thank you.
I'm very worried about her.
Thank you.
I don't
We want you to like her.
I don't think things are going to go okay. I'm very concerned.
Good. Thank you. Marie is good at that point in the book.
Right. So we just wanted to start with giving you an opportunity to tell a little bit about yourself, maybe something that people don't know, or what is it like to live as a mystery writer in Starkville, Mississippi?
We were talking about that before. It's so funny because I didn't expect my life to my writing to take off the way it did. It was just a total luck and timing fluke. I wrote this Cat Carlisle. The Silent Woman started out as a semi-romantic novella that I turned into HarperCollins in response to a Twitter submission call. And of course they rejected it. You know, I have so many rejections. And then a couple months later, the acquisitions editor wrote and asked if I could turn it into a book in 2 months. And I said, sure, you know, crazy me. And I actually did it and went through the professional editorial process with HarperCollins, which was just amazing. Just the editors there were so great. And then the book came out in April of 2018. My husband and I went on vacation in June, and we were camping, and we came off the, out from the wilderness, and I had hit the USA Today bestseller list. It was just luck and timing. And so the second book released in March, I want to say March of 2019. And I have a third book I'm editing now, which will come out in March of 2020. And then I'm writing 3 more books that feature a 62-year-old divorce attorney in modern times. So it's just, it's been great. I mean, I just love writing. I didn't think I would be able to do it full time. The minute I decided that I was just going to work part-time and write and treat it as a hobby, I sold my books and I'm able now to write. So it's great.
What was that process like, the 2-month turnaround between the novella and the novel? It sounds like it would have been crazy.
It was. I write in the morning. I get up and write like from 4 to 7. So I'm finished for the day, and I just did it. I just stuck to it and I pushed through, and I wrote like 4,000 words a day, Monday through Friday. And I mean, I just was so productive. And then I turned it in, and I had to do a lot of rewrites, but it definitely made the book better. And I learn a lot about myself with each book I write. You know, there's always, you learn about your writing and then you learn about yourself. You know, it's just, it's a deep process.
What's been the most interesting thing that you learned about yourself working on the Cat Carlisle series?
Well, I didn't know I was going to actually write World War II mysteries. That just kind of fell in. I don't even know. I've always liked that period of time. My father fought in World War II, and I like the clothes, and I like being away. I like spending time with people that aren't on cell phones, honestly. It was important. But what I learned, that was your question?
Yes.
What I learned, that to keep writing, you know, to really push myself to keep writing. I switched when this series hit the USA Today bestseller list to taking myself seriously as a professional writer and treating it as my job. And it comes first. I'm sorry, husband, if you're watching this online, but you know, it is a special thing that I do. And I gear my life around getting my words written. And I force myself to sit down and write on the days where it's not fun. You know, I write some days and I know it's not good and I know I can edit it and I just keep going. So that's what I've learned to push, I would say.
Excellent. So this is the Cat Carlisle series. You said you liked writing about World War II, but what was more of the inspiration behind like this story?
Well, the first series I wrote, the Sarah Bennett series, I was paying a nod to the Gothic books from the 70s, you know, the women in their nightgowns running away from the castles. And I just love those stories. So that's why I wrote these. The Cat Carlisle books are the books that I love to read. I love British mysteries. And I wanted to write a more sophisticated heroine who was rather reckless. And that's Cat's problem. She's a reckless person. If there's trouble, she's going to find it. If they tell her, don't do this, she does it. And I was inspired by her character. It just kind of came to me that I wanted to explore this type of a woman. And my books have a feminist angle. It's just by virtue of the fact that I'm passionate about that. I'm passionate about equal rights and things like that. And taking someone who is wanting to be an independent woman and putting her in the social strictures of upper society Britain in the 1930s was really an opportunity to showcase what the world was like and give her some conflict. I have no problem dropping Cat Carlisle into conflict. I can find trouble for her, you know, I could write, I have 20 stories for her in my head if I want to, you know. So.
It really seems like the character is the driving force in your writing, but what would you think, like what would you say, is that the most important part, or is the setting the most important part in the story, and then the character sort of evolved out of that?
Oh, so the setting is World War II in the houses that I love, like Downton Abbey. So if a writer does setting right, people will come up to you and say, oh, the house or the setting was like a character in the book. But I don't think that really plays into the Cat Carlisle book so much, but these are mysteries. So when I'm plotting my books, I spend time on the characters and then I drop them in the plot. So I know that I have 2 or 3 viewpoint characters, and those characters have a very deliberate character arc. They start feeling one way, and by the end of the book, they're feeling a different way. And often they've come to realize that what they wanted in the beginning is not what they need at all. You know, that's how I plan it. And then as for the story, I plot out my mystery in a way that benefits and drives the characters. It's equally entwined. People always ask what comes first, the chicken or the egg. And for me, it's both equally. I spend probably more time outlining and character sketches, working that out longer. It takes me longer to do that than it takes me to write the actual book. I do all the logical stuff, you know, and I do a very cohesive, detailed outline. And then when I sit down and write the book, I don't have to problem solve. I rarely back myself into a corner. I can just run the film in my head and write down. That's how I do it.
Can you speak a little bit more to sort of like this pre-planning part of the writing process that you have? It's like, it seems like it's really detailed and like you know exactly what you kind of want to go when you start the actual writing process, or is it all kind of together?
There's 2 kinds of writers in the world. I'm a plotter, Plotter, and then they have pantsers. They call them pantsers, but now the pantsers had a rebellion, and we call them discovery writers now. But I'm a plotter. I follow a very detailed outline. I arc my characters, and then I know the phase of the moon, what the weather, where the scene's going to take place, what's going to happen, how it's going to perpetuate conflict. I do an emotional map. I know, you know, she comes in the room happy and she leaves angry, and this is why, and I'm going to fix it in chapter 18. I know all that stuff before I sit down and write. It's really important. I usually get the last sentence of the book. That's usually the first thing that comes to me, and then I change it. And then I get about halfway through, excuse me, oops. I get about halfway through and I have to rework. You know, I give myself permission to rework stuff, but I set everything up before I actually write. That's how it works for me. I've tried it the other way and it doesn't work.
Can you tell us, we were talking earlier about your killer.
Yes.
And
yes.
So given the fact that you have just talked about plotting everything out and being very careful, when do you know who your killer is?
I usually have an idea who the killer is when I start, but most of the time I write the book like it's one person and then I switch it at the end. So those hints will be red herrings, and then I'll put a few beats in to lead to the killer. Sometimes there's a character in the second Cat Carlisle book, a young woman named Carmona Broadbent. She's not the killer, I'll tell you, but she, and I don't set her up to be the killer, so I'm okay telling you this, but she is, the first time in my writing, I'm working on my 7th book now, she took over, and she was just supposed to be a placeholder, and she grew into this character that was so rich. She's a young woman from a prominent family who has a domineering mother who wants her to marry and have babies, male babies hopefully, and she wants to be a doctor. And her parents spoil her, so she uses her money to hire a tutor, and she learns science, and she applies to medical school and gets accepted. And so she and her mother have this big thing, and that story just organically unfolded. So while I say that I'm a plotter, I am, but it's good to leave your characters room to grow, and that's important because you want your characters to be real. So it's nice to know what I'm going to write today when I sit down to write, but I'm open to the fact that all things might go south and we won't be writing what we think we're going to write. And that happens more than
In terms of your process and how detailed it is and how much you prepare in advance, what is your relationship with the editorial process once you send the book off and you have it perfect,
Yeah.
you think, anyway, and then you send it to your publisher? What is that interaction like for you?
Well, before I send it off, I have 2 excellent beta readers. One of them is in the audience this evening. Take a bow, Kim. And then they catch stuff, and they catch this doesn't work, and she didn't drive here, the continuity stuff,
Right.
and the writing if things don't work. But the editing experience at HarperCollins has been amazing. I get a 8-page single-spaced editorial memo where they tell me how I can flesh stuff out and make it better, and lots of comments in the actual manuscript. They guide me along, and a lot of people say, well, aren't they changing everything? But if you want your book to sell, you need to work with an editor. I mean, you have to edit, and I would say editing is more important than writing, because you can't edit a blank screen. Once you get the writing done, you can always fix it. So it's important to set the book aside and let it gel for a while. I usually move on to outlining another book, and then I'll go back and edit. I try to stay way ahead of my deadlines so I can go back and edit. But I'm down for editing. I want to rewrite. I want an editor to tell me this stinks and you need to rewrite the first 50 pages. I'm very open to that. I think you have to be, as a writer of any genre. But
is it ever hard to get that feedback from the editors? Because I feel like you put a lot of work and effort into writing. Is it hard to get that feedback, or are you just excited to know what you need to do to make it better?
They're smart, and they write a few paragraphs of what they like. So they'll say, this is great, this is great, this is great. And then I know what's coming up after that. And it's called structural edits, and I love structural edits. I love writing. I love everything about writing. I can't, it's pretty cool. So, and it's really amazing to work with an editor who is really good at editing, because the book that gets published is nothing like the book I turned in. I have a specific methodology I use for plotting. My creative writing education is in screenwriting, and so I use certain methodology, and I've never had a page 1 rewrite where the plot isn't right, but I'll have to flesh out characters and tighten certain things and fix stuff. But it's always very doable, and my writing gets better. That's the thing about writing. If you do it, you see improvements right away. So,
what kind of improvements or difference do you see over time as a writer, from the Sarah Bennett mysteries to the Cat Carlisle mysteries?
So I'm reading this tonight and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is not good. You just get better. You just the prose gets tighter. And I like to think of it as you get into the story and you're not reading, I'm not there anymore. If a reader sits down and reads a book and I'm not there, they're just into the story and into the characters, I know I've done my job. And as I read my previous books, I notice the improvement, and I have a long way to go. I think you never catch up to, there's so many fabulous writers out there, but I think that my writing is slowly getting tighter, and with the editorial process, they clean all that stuff up. So,
one of the things that they always tell you, or did decades ago when I worked in publishing, is that you have to have your elevator pitch.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And the commercial comparison.
Right.
So who do you see yourself in the same vein as for our audience?
Like a comparable.
Yeah.
I don't write as well as the people I'm going to tell you, but I'll tell you what I want to be when I grow up. Jane Finn, the Clara Vine series, I love those. They take place in Berlin in 1930s, and her protagonist is an actor, and she infiltrates the German film industry and spies, and they're fabulous. I think there's 6 books. And I love Jacqueline Winspear, the Maisie Dobbs mysteries. I love those. I love all British mysteries. Deborah Crombie and Elizabeth George, and she's American, but she writes British procedurals. So You know, I love Franny Fisher.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and some of my friends in the UK say that the Cat Carlisle books remind them of Midsummer Murders, which I love.
Okay,
you
yeah,
know. Carrie Greenwood, does she write Midsummer Murders? I can't remember. Carolyn Graham, the Midsummer Murders. I love those. So, but you know, getting comps as an author, if you go to Amazon, the also bots.
Oh, right.
That's how I get my comp. That's a great way to get comps. That's a pro tip for anyone who's interested. That's a good way to get comps.
It's a great pro tip.
Yeah, great pro tip.
Do you have any other pro tips?
Ask and I'll, I mean, you know,
Right. I'll lead you through some.
I will tell you that, you know, getting up at 4 and writing, I've been up this morning editing a book I'm working on. My brain turns to mush like around 3 or 4. So, you know, if I say anything embarrassing, I apologize in advance. But don't ask me to elevator pitch.
It's very low stakes.
Okay.
Very low stakes. You're good.
Thanks.
Is writing in the morning like that, is that a sort of almost like a daily ritual for you, or is it just you decided this is the best time where I'm most productive and effective?
It's the time when I wake up or that early, which I do 3 or 4 days a week. I just get up and get my pages done. It just works for me. And yeah, because I'm right out of bed with my coffee and I get my words down, and that just seems to work for me. When I'm on deadline, you know, I'll be writing it whenever I can write because I have to get stuff turned in or stuff edited. But I try to do my 4 to 7 gig at least 4 days a week, Monday through Friday.
Have you done, when you said your pages, have you done the Artist's Way? Have we talked
Yes.
about this? Can you talk a little bit about how that's helped you? Or?
Yes. So the Artist's Way, my day job was, I was a court reporter in California, and I always had a flair for legal writing, and I knew I always wanted to be a writer, but I decided I wanted to write fiction, and I accidentally moved into this house that this woman who was best friends with Elizabeth Atwood Taylor, who wrote the Maggie whatever her name is, mysteries in the 80s. And she taught me how to write. And the Artist's Way, the morning pages, it just talks to you about the creative side that I think is all of us lose when we grow up because we don't play. You know, I mean, people don't draw. We don't like just buy crayons or just do the things that we do to nurture our creative selves. And when people say, well, I'm not creative, I'm scientific, and it's like everybody has a creative side to them that adulthood quashes pretty relentlessly. And The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, she has a series of exercises that it's a really lovely book. It's really well written. And one of the things that she suggests is that you get up every morning first thing and longhand write 3 pages. And if you don't have anything to say, you can just write, I don't have anything to say over and over, but it's the pen to paper, loosening your brain. And I did that. And I think I did that in like 1993, I'm dating way long ago, but it was a page turner for me. I mean, it definitely made me think I could write novels, and that's what I wanted to do. And it taps into that part of your brain, you know, definitely frees that creativity, and you can take that into your non-creative life too. Yeah, she's amazing.
I did it, and it was very productive for me, although I've not written any novels since I started.
You need to write a novel.
No, I don't think so. But it reminded me what you were talking about turning the novella into a novel, very similar to what people are doing in National Novel Writing Month, right? Just churning out the first draft. 50,000 words.
Yeah.
And you were churning out 4,000 a day. Is that,
and
was that real?
That's unsustainable.
Right.
That's not as sustainable. I try to write 2,000 words a day. I'm okay if it's 1,000. I usually clock in around 1,500 to 1,700. But and then some days I have to force myself, and it's 987. It's like I'm finished. I can't do another word. But you know, it's the writing every day, even if it's just a page. You know, it's the writing every day.
Does the revision happen at a different time of day, or are you still, is that 4 to 7 also reserved for revising?
I just write, and I can sit and edit all day.
Okay.
But no, that's just for writing. Yeah. I usually read my books out loud, one time, which really cleans up the prose. And then my beta readers catch stuff. And then when I get my manuscript back for structural edits, that's, it's more linear. I might have to rewrite a chapter or a paragraph here or there, but it's not, just composing tons of prose.
Sure.
So I do that, and I allow 2 or 3 months for that process. And, and that gives me plenty of time, and it's not stressful. I do find that if I have to sit down and force myself, this book, I was able to write like that fast pace, and it didn't take away my creativity, but it becomes an issue of diminished return. You sit and you write and you create, and then everything, it just like, I can't do this anymore, and it can be harmful to the process. It's important to stop, especially because we work all day and we do our 40-hour work week, and there's just no way I could write 40 hours a week, and it just would not be pretty, and no one would buy it. So it's important to take care of yourself. And that harkens back to the morning pages.
Right.
Because did they do that for you when
Yeah.
It's like it just changes your worldview somehow and lets you see things in a more artistic way or something.
Absolutely.
For me,
Absolutely.
anyway. It did for me.
You mentioned earlier that your creative writing background was actually in screenwriting.
Right.
Do you ever kind of go back to that or experiment with other genres?
I have written scripts. I haven't written, I like the screenwriting because it's very visual, and I think it's better for the reader. I think readers like visual fiction. I think they like deep point of view, and I think they like visual fiction. I try not to waste a lot of time with the flowery, it's like put them in the conflict, get them resolving it, talk about the full moon when it's lighting the way for them, but you don't have to write 5 pages about the moon. So tell me your question again, I'm sorry.
Do you ever experiment? Do you ever go back
other
to
genres?
or do you ever experiment?
I don't. Right now I don't, because I'm under contract and I have
Right.
books and stuff. But I would like to write novellas, and I specifically write mysteries, and then I'll go for read for pleasure and read other stuff. But I'm a mystery author. That's what I like. It's predominantly what I like to read. And so right now that's what I'm doing. Maybe I'll change and write something different at some point, but I do like my mysteries. My husband always says, "What are you reading?" Let me guess. Mystery, British. Yes. He's like, "Yes, that's it."
So you do read. Who are your favorite people to read?
Right now I'm loving Deborah Crombie. I love Louise Penny, the Inspector Gamache.
Mhm.
There's a plot line in it that I don't like, where her protagonist, Inspector Gamache, has problems at work with his police force. They take place in French Canada and Quebec. And there's just 3 or 4 books where the drama at work for him is just depressing. And it's like, well, I'm wondering why she's doing that, because it takes away from the good mystery, which her writing is really good. I like the Sebastian St. Cyr mysteries by C.S. Harris. Do you read those?
Mhm.
They're awesome. I love Sue Grafton, and I just about cried when she left.
Yeah.
That was really sad. I have ones that I go back and read over and over. I love the Deanna Rayburn Lady Julia mysteries. They take place in the late 1800s, and they're just fun. They're very well written and lots of fun. I love Agatha Christie. I love Agatha Christie. And I know people say, oh, they're dry teacup rattlers, but I think that given the time period in which these Agatha Christie wrote, her books are actually very psychologically rich. She's interesting and quirky and very subtle. I could go on and on.
I was raised on Agatha Christie.
I love
mine.
Agatha. Yeah, I love it. Who's your favorite Agatha Christie person?
Oh God, I don't even know if I could pick Poirot, of course.
Yes, I love
mean,
Poirot. I like
the
Jane Marple.
mustaches.
Yes. And the
Jane
little
Marple
grace,
is wonderful in a
yeah.
whole different way.
Yeah. But see, I think Jane Marple is a feminist treatise in a way.
I can see that.
I mean, if you think of it from a different angle, it's so interesting how everyone respects her. The little old lady gets the respect. It's
authority.
interesting.
She has authority, right?
Right. But she really, in society, probably wouldn't.
Right.
So there's kind of, it brings up an interesting social thing too. picking apart Agatha Christie. I could do it all day.
So in terms of your, to go back to the revision process, what do you look at first when you're going through the first revision?
I read the editorial letter. And well, I get it and I print it and I put it over there and I like go around the house so I don't have to see it. And then the next morning, or when I'm ready, I just read it, and I read it several times, and then I'll open up the book and go through all her comments. They use the track changes function in Microsoft Word, so I get all these comments and edits as she goes, and then I'll go through and read it again. And then I'll just slowly, start the process. If I have to add beats or rework the plot, if there's a lot of structural plot edits, I'll do a storyboard, a post-it for each chapter, and then I can move it around and just to keep track of what I need to change. But as the books go on, that has been less and less, so it's not as difficult to do that stuff. But and I get 30 days to do them, and then I might have a second round. So it's getting easier as I'm writing more, then less and less edits. So I don't know if it's that or my beta readers are getting better at keeping me on my path to publication.
Do you have any advice for budding mystery novelists, whether it's in the revision process or in the writing process? Someone who wants to be you when they grow up, what should they do?
Oh my gosh. Write. Who said don't be a writer, be writing? And you can't, there's all kinds of one-line things, but you really just need to write and give yourself permission to write crappy prose and know that you're not going to like what you write. It takes a long time to learn to write fiction. I mean, it's a hard business and it's a tough job, and most people give up. And I think Ira Glass, The Gap, has anyone seen that? He talks about when you set out to create art, you have a level of sophistication because you go to the movies and you read books. And when you start to do your own, there's a gap between what you produce and your taste. You've got this sophisticated, developed taste. And he talks about how most people give up because breaching the gap, which is, if you have a chance, Google it. It's a short, I think it's a video on YouTube that you can find, but it's tough to bridge that gap and keep writing and just keep on writing. And, there's books about writing and classes about writing, but really what you need to do is you need to sit down and say, I'm going to write one page every day, and just sit down and write and learn your craft and find someone you trust to critique your work, because you better learn to take criticism as a writer. I mean, that's 90% criticism and rejection, really. It is.
That sounds terrible.
But it's really fun. It's a really good job, even though it's all bad.
Not for the faint of heart.
Right. But there's, you have to love it to do it. It's hard. It's a hard job.
One of the things I'm now obsessed with asking people about is their ideas about writer's block, whether it exists or not. First, apparently, is a question you have to ask.
Right.
And then, do you have any techniques for addressing it if you do believe it exists?
I don't believe it exists because I'm so busy with character sketches and plot outlines and whatnot that if I sit down to write a scene, because I know what I'm going to write for my outline, and it doesn't work, there's a chance that the scene isn't good because it doesn't fit into the story. So I can always go back to my logical work where I work on the character sketches and the plot outline. And if I do my plot outline, that's where I struggle. If I'm going to struggle with the story, I can't figure out how to fix a problem. And I usually can if I just step away and go for a walk. And then sometimes I just have to sit there and force myself and trust, and that's the diminished return thing. When you step away from it, your subconscious mind percolates. It's really rather fascinating. I keep a notebook by the side of my bed, and all of a sudden I know how I'm going to fix it, and it gets better. And that's the magic of writing for me. It's just like, wow, I have to trust that my subconscious mind is going to bubble up with the solution. And so far, is this wood? So far it has,
Ish.
Yeah, pretend. So far it has, so far it has. It's worked out. So anyway, I don't like to talk about that because I don't want to jinx it, the writer's block thing.
I apologize for
That's
bringing
okay.
it up.
That's okay. But I just think that you can go back to the work, you know, because there's the art and then there's the work. And for me, the work is the outline and the character sketches. And by the time I sit down to write, I've done all the problem solving. And then there's also that you need to sit down and write, you know, and like Julia Cameron says in The Artist Way, if you sit down and write, this is terrible, and you know it's terrible, you still write. And that's advice too. It's, you know, that's the difference between, oh, I don't want to write today, or I have to because this book is due in a month, you know. So.
Have you played around with any other genres besides fiction writing, like poetry or playwriting, aside from screenwriting?
I took a poetry class and wrote embarrassing poetry, and I've written some other stuff, and I burned it all. Burned it when my husband and I moved here from San Francisco. It was really fun. I was going to start with a clean slate, and I burned all my stuff.
It felt good.
Yeah, it felt great. Yeah, never see the light of day. Be thankful, readers.
Well, I'm sure that as a librarian and who has archives, I'm horrified by the fact that you burned this.
I do,
But
I do keep.
We'll have nightmares about
curating.
it later, but it's fine.
I keep KAs, you know, like CAHIERS, and I write down quotes and blurbs and stuff, and I use moleskin notebooks, and I fill them with all kinds of crazy doodles and stuff.
Keep those.
I'll give them to you. I'll
Okay.
see that you get those.
Good.
When I die. You can have them. Oh my goodness, you guys probably think I'm a crazy writer, but I am.
Crazy writers are great
Yeah.
to have around.
Thank you.
Much more entertaining
Oh.
than not crazy writers.
Who wants them around? Us, I guess, because we're librarians, actually. Never
Right.
mind.
You like all writers.
We like everybody.
Yeah.
Do you want to open it up to?
Yes. To any questions from the audience, from Zoom? If you have any last comments, anything that we didn't touch on that you'd like to just talk about and share with us, maybe about your move or.
Oh, let's see. Well, I'll tell you something interesting. I've always wanted to write mystery series with an older protagonist. I think that women my age read a lot, and it's hard to find books with someone in my age, close to my age. I'm in my late 50s. And so I have a new series coming out. I signed a 3-book contract. The first book is slated for release in the end of 2020, which features a 62-year-old divorce attorney in San Francisco. And I'm really excited about it. I cannot wait. Her name's Olivia Sinclair. And I'll tell you something interesting. When I write, I always cast my books with movie stars, so I know.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, it's really fun. And so my older lady is going to be played by Olivia Celia Ward. Her name's Olivia Sinclair. And I cast Celia Ward as her. That's who I see playing her. And I am having such a blast writing this mystery series. I am so excited about it. It's like, I feel like it's the story I was meant to tell. And the Cat Carlisle books are the books, you know, that I love to read. They tell you to write what you know and stuff. But this character is just full of oomph. I can't wait to get her out in the world.
What is the difference between the process of writing a historical and then a current day mystery?
Well, I could, like, if you look at like Pam Jenoff and Alice Quinn, who write the Alice Network, Kate Quinn, those books are on the bestseller list, but they tell fictionalized stories about the actual war. You know, they're based on actual historical figures, and I don't do that. My books are set in World War II, and I'm not really trying to document the events of the war as much as try to tell the readers what it felt like to live during this particular time. That's what I'm really trying to show. So it's important for me to be historically accurate with the details, rationing, when the buses stopped in London, people traveling north, things that you couldn't get, and what it felt like to live during this time. And as an author who writes during this time, I was always so struck, especially by the people in the UK and the sacrifices of the ordinary people and the great extent that they went to carry on, you know, despite 20 miles away across the channel. You know,
Right.
it was close. It was close. And so I really wanted to show what it felt like to live during that time, especially as the people who actually bore witness are dying. I mean, that generation is going and the oral witnesses are gone. And I really wanted to focus on the ordinary citizens during those books. So, you know, as opposed to the research I'll do for my new series, which is just legally accurate, because she's a lawyer and that'll be easy for me because of my legal background.
I've always wondered, as a history major, what the research process for when you're writing a historical novel looks like.
Okay, so I have a process. I subscribe to the British Newspaper Archives, and I read the newspaper. I pick the day in the year that my story takes place, March 2nd, 1941. And I read the newspapers, both 30 days either way. I pay attention to the advertisements, and the personals are so much fun. It's like their Facebook. The personals were like their Facebook. And then there's so many declassified documents at the British Archive where I actually could read cabinet minutes and see the concern. You know, they were very concerned about Hitler. And then I read diaries and I watch movies. And when I'm writing a book, I read books that were on the bestseller list during the period. I submerge myself in this period. So I listen to music, you know, from that era and just submerge myself in that period. And then as I'm researching, of course, there's questions that come up and I make a note in the manuscript and bold, double check this. And I double check everything because the critics will rip you. They will rip you. I mean, in a cruel way, you know, in an anonymous, cruel way. So I try to be very meticulous about that. And like I said, I don't have to, I don't write books about the history. They're set in the history.
Right.
So there's a distinction, I think.
I've always been really curious about that, so thank you.
Everybody kind of gets their own research together, and of course I wonder, am I doing this right? You know, but clearly I am for my stories. But I don't trust myself enough to write a deeply detailed historical depiction of a certain event. You know, just that's never appealed to me. I'm more interested in having strong characters and the psychological drama of people. That's more intriguing to me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This has been wonderful.
Thank
you so
you.
much
This
for
was
joining
fun.
us. And if you're joining us on Zoom, thank you very much for tuning in. And that's it.
Thank you.